All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone to the Gerety Jury Insights panel featuring four jurors from the US who will be taking us inside the jury room of this year's Gerety Awards for a look at some of the entries as well as some of the trends this year that they found most exciting. I'm Tim Nudd, creativity editor at Ad Age, and I'm pleased to welcome our panelists today, Myra Nussbaum, President and Chief Creative Officer of Havas Chicago. Hey, Myra.
Hi, happy to be here.
Great to have you. Tiana Conley, VP of Global Chocolate at Mars. Hi, Tiana.
Hello.
Elisa Wolfson, EVP and Head of Design at Leo Burnett Chicago. Hi, Lisa.
Hello.
And Lindria Reynolds, Founder and Chief Brand Strategist at LR Brand Consulting, Inc. Hi, Lindria.
Hello.
It's great to have you all here. So I thought we would start off. I think you guys just did jury judging last week, so the work's all fresh in your mind, I'm sure. So I thought we'd just sort of go around the room and ask each of you for a couple pieces that you really loved from this year's show, what you loved about them and why they connected with you. So Myra, can we start with you?
Yes, there was lots of great work, and it was exciting to judge with my first ever jury full of women. Very different than any other jury I'd been on before, mostly because it was some of the best conversation I've ever had. But enough about that. I'll get into the work. The first one that I chose was Tuvalu, the first digital nation. I was really, we all know that sustainability and global warming and our Earth is literally in peril as we meet. I thought it was such a creative way to communicate that and the dire state that we're in by preserving the first ever nation that will be enveloped by the ocean. It was not only very touching and very human with showcasing the people that live on the island, but also I thought it was a feat in technology and being able to store literally a nation in a cloud to preserve their culture, their heritage for future generations, to not only learn about the wonderful society that they created, but to also make us all very, very aware that other nations could be following in their path if we don't make really immediate and large changes to the way we're doing business or living.
Yeah, that's a great one. For those who aren't aware of that campaign, it was done by the Monkees, which is a part of Accenture Song, Australian agency, and Tuvalu is a small Pacific island nation that's very threatened by climate change, rising sea levels, and they've basically decided to recreate their nation in the metaverse. Kind of a wild idea, great PR sort of idea, and also just, as you say, sort of brought to life kind of amazingly.
And I think, like, not to get into all the details of it, but I think that they worked through the United Nations. I think I'm getting that right, to bring it to the attention beyond just like being in the press and getting attention that way, but to bring it to attention of legislators and lawmakers in hopes that real changes can be made around the world to protect our planet. And I do think it was just so lovely, the craft and the way they handled it. And it wasn't doomsday. It was hopeful. I think there was a seriousness to it, but it was hopeful that if we make changes, we can preserve other places in the real world, not just preserving them in the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
My second one, let's totally shifting gears, because not only do I take the planet very seriously, but I take chocolate and candy very lightheartedly. And I think the Twix campaign, specifically the entry was the camping one with the two bears in the woods, commenting on the identical twin, I think, brother campers, and talking about like the product benefit, like what they love about Twix, which is that crunch and the caramel pull, but using humor to like just be really engaging, continuing that message of like the left and the right really creatively. I mean, we all know that campaign and love it for years, but it was a fresh new twist and freaking hilarious. And I've seen it in other jury rooms and everybody can't help themselves but laughing. And shout out to Tiana, who happens to be on this call. I was so excited to have the client that brought that work to life on our jury. So well, I don't know if you want to give Tiana a shout out about that now, or we can get to it later, but really,
I'd love
great.
to hear a little bit from Tiana about that. I mean, obviously candy advertising has such a long and fun history going back to the Skittles work in the early 2000s, and Twix has been a big part of that over the last decade. I'd love to hear just a little bit, Tiana, about that work from you.
For sure. Well, first of all, I'd love to give a huge shout out to our team that worked on it at Mars, and of course, our partners at DDB. I was truthfully doing my best to keep an absolute straight face in the panel, and of course abstained from voting. But I have to tell you, through the creative process, absolutely was hilarious, even in the creative process, working through it. And I think Myra absolutely got it, as a creative, but also as a consumer, that the point was to be delightful and hilarious and reinforce the benefit of the product, and keep that continuity of our messaging throughout time. So I think you absolutely picked up what we were putting down through the spot, and glad to see that delivered.
You made it easy.
It's definitely kind of a perfect 30 seconds for sure,
yes.
in sort of classic candy advertising style. All right, thank you, Myra. And Tiana, I wanted to ask you next for your two picks. I know one of them was also sort of a humor-driven campaign.
For sure, yeah. I really resonated with the Burger King Even More Confusing Times for the vegan nuggets. And, something that I think is really important about advertising is to really land emotionally. And I think with that spot is just the humor that came through in it. It should land with you in some way that taps into an emotional space. In this case, I actually did laugh out loud when the spot played. But I think beyond that, importantly, the communication was insightful in terms of conveying real insights for consumers, but also in the insights as the confusion times played out for consumers, really reinforced the ironic benefit of the product itself. So, as they were kind of spouting out these different ironies, definitely reinforced why vegan nuggets is such an enigma. And I think really, really nailed it. So I just thought it was funny, funny, ironic, and really, really did it for me.
Yeah, that one's from the agency David, of course. And I believe that campaign originally started during COVID, which was sort of perfect because everybody was confused about the world in general during COVID. So it had that sort of cultural tension as well. And
I love that you use past tense. I mean,
well,
there's still some confusion.
There's still some confusion going on, yes. And I think there was also a lot of radio work in that campaign, which was really interesting. It kind of worked really well as a radio campaign too, because it was sort of creepy and like quiet. And but I like that choice as well. What was your other one, Tiana?
Yeah, the next spot that really landed for me was Women in Games, Gender Swap. And to me, this one had resonance on a lot of different levels. And I have to admit, I'm not the biggest gamer. But the idea here, turning gender stereotypes in gaming on their heads and kind of putting that, sight, sound, motion that typically follows the female gaming characters, where they're super hypersexualized, and kind of visualizing those into the male characters absolutely landed. And so I think they made their point in a not so subtle way that I think absolutely reinforced the point they were trying to make. But beyond just making that point, I think it was just absolutely funny. And I kind of wanted to play with those male characters. I'm like, I kind of want to see the hypersexualized like male Batman with these characters. And I kind of like want to play that game. On a serious note, it did really land with me as a parent to two young children who are both gamers. I have a 10-year-old son and an 8-year-old daughter. So I do think it is a really serious issue with the prevalence of gaming and the ages in which they're targeted to. So I think they had a really important message that they were landing with as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tiana. Elisa, I know you were sort of impressed by that campaign too. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Women in Games gender swap.
Yeah, I piled on that. So I couldn't come up with another one that I loved as much as that one. I just echo those comments, but also in this realm of doing work that has a purpose and is pointing out a major problem in the world. Like if one of two gamers are women, I think that's maybe half. It's just, and it's a strange phenomena that women are hypersexualized in gaming. I mean, and so many women play. So how are we as a gender letting that happen? I'm not a gamer. I have actually a 14-year-old non-binary child who is a gamer. And, you know, we talk about gender all the time at home. And just the idea that they're being exposed to those sorts of conversations without our oversight, and that somebody chose to highlight that issue in a very poignant, but also really funny way. I mean, when you see the men hypersexualized in the same manner as the women normally are, it's embarrassing as a society that we let that happen, but it also has some sort of humor to it where you realize how hyperbolized and how just hysterically weird the situation is that we've gotten ourselves in. And sometimes humor really does heal, but also point out the absolute truth in the world that we can't bear to even think. So I loved that. I had seen it before in a different jury room and it had always stuck with me. And when I saw it again, it reminded me how much I loved it and how just perfect that execution was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, campaign, I believe, by BETC Paris. And it is interesting how you can just flip something on its head and suddenly see the original in such a new light. Very simple, very persuasive idea, and also just fun. I'm sure we can talk about this later, but just making purpose advertising palatable and fun to sort of experience is a challenge. And this campaign did it really well. What was the other one, Elisa, that you chose?
The other one was actually a bit more serious, but also very poignant. It's something called Dogs Without Borders. And I think when I see a idea for purpose-driven work, I really wanted to solve a human problem. And in this sense, it solved more than a human problem. It actually took two problems that we're having in the world and co-joined them in a way that was super lovely and simple and didn't miss a beat. So basically the idea is turning rescue dogs into medical detection dogs. And so there's an enormous amount of rescue dogs in the world or dogs who don't have homes that need homes and need to be rescues. And this effort brings them into a situation where they can go into different communities and different locations who ordinarily wouldn't be able to have a mammogram to detect early signs of breast cancer. And so what they've done is they've come up with some I would call it like IP to be able to harness the scent detection that dogs are able to smell and put that into kits that are conveniently shaped like these beautiful plastic bones, and then to be able to ship that out to be analyzed by medical practitioners and doctors who would ordinarily not be able to travel to a remote location. And so to me, it's like, it's bringing, the dog problem and having all these stray dog problems together with women who aren't able to get the medical attention that they need because of either social economic problems or their remote locations, and fusing those together in a really nicely designed little package that is memorable and easy to understand for people. I mean, the medicine is out there for people, and the science is out there for people. And I believe this is through the Red Cross. And I think that the idea really made it convenient for them to be able to help people in mass in a way that people hadn't been helped before. And I think if we could eradicate breast cancer for certain communities, we could be doing a lot for the world.
Definitely. Yeah, we just wrote about this campaign not too long ago, within the last month or so. And it was created by VML YNR. And, especially in the run up to Cannes, our radar is out for stuff that's kind of bogus or whatever. But this struck me as really like a real, two very real issues that they were dealing with, quite seriously. It's hard because we do see a lot of work that's made for award shows, and this didn't feel like that to me.
We talked about that on our jury, and we also had our detectors out, and we did talk about this case as could this be real? Is this real? And it is real, and it's possibly so real that we should be doing it for a lot of other communities who either because of work constraints or family constraints can't get to their medical providers to find out if they are in fact sick.
Yeah, definitely. Really cool campaign. All right, Lindria, would love to hear your two choices, if you could share them.
Absolutely. I think like everyone else, it was difficult. I loved every campaign that everyone on this call has mentioned. So it was very tough. I would say I'll start on the lighter note. The Run With It campaign from the NFL featuring Diana Flores. I absolutely loved that ad. It was like a 2-minute storyline, and I was engaged the whole time. I felt like I was watching a mini action film. And I think any type of ad or storytelling that can create some type of nostalgia is really good. And I told my fellow jury members that I used to play flag football. And so I actually, in elementary school, I played touch football. And then in college, I played women's flag football. And then I did co-ed flag football in my early 20s. And so I smiled the whole time. I had this emotional resonance with it. And I understood what it was like to be running with men. And you're showing that I'm better than you. I'm not even going to say I'm just as good, but I'm better than you. And so I loved every bit of it. I thought it was intentional inclusivity and representation. It didn't feel forced. And so you had Diana Flores, and then she ran to her mom's house and they're speaking Spanish. They're speaking in their native language. And so it didn't feel like, oh, we're just trying to, we want to appeal to this community, because I know that the NFL, they are trying to appeal more to women and Gen Z and the Hispanic population. And I thought that this campaign did a really great job with doing it in a smart way. I felt like it was intelligent storytelling. And I also thought it did a great job at addressing not storytelling, but stereotypes in a kind of a fun, poking kind of way. Like there was a point when the two bell guys were trying to catch her, and they went in this really high pitched voice. You have to say it like this, housekeeping. And then she jumped in and just kind of knocked them down. And so, it was interesting, just kind of the way they poke fun at stereotypes, but intentionally address them and saying that, we can overcome them, and this is how we do it. And I know that the goal of the campaign was really to promote including flag football in the 2028 Olympics. And I think they did a really great job. And it was great because I think a lot of women watching, if you're not a football fan, you may have watched the actual Super Bowl to see Rihanna. And then here you had this moment that actually celebrated you as a woman. And if you're an athlete, an athletic woman. And so I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, that one was great. We talked about a lot about that one at Ad Age, actually, because it was a Super Bowl commercial. So obviously we spend that whole week sort of dissecting all those ads. And, it's funny, if you compare that spot to what the NFL did just a couple of years ago for their 100th anniversary, which was the ballroom and all the male players from the last 50 years, so masculine. It's like, and then here, if you had told me that like a couple of years later they would have a 2-minute spot about women's flag football starring a Mexican woman, I wouldn't have believed it. So it kind of shows kind of how the league's evolving, or in some ways probably being forced to evolve. But yeah, 72 and Sunny did that work, and I thought that was really pretty incredible also.
Yeah, I loved it. I think the other beauty about it, with highlighting a Mexican star, it just shows that, we all have commonalities, and, we love sports, we love games, no matter, what our walk of life is or what our culture is, and so I love that they were intentional about even showing that belonging piece within the sports industry, and so we're all here, and we can represent it well. So yeah, I love that ad.
Had a little bit of Nike in there too, with like the little cameos, like Mr. Beast and
Mr. Beast. Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Cool. And what was the other one that you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, so I say my other one on a more serious note is the Adlam campaign. And similar to what Myra was saying about preserving a culture, I thought this was a really unique way to preserve the Pular, I hope I'm saying it right, the Pular language for the Fulani people of West Africa. And I've studied design and typography. And so I was looking, and I enjoyed it. And I thought that it was the fact that the story behind it with these two brothers who created, they actually wrote this language. They created this, they wrote it out 30 years ago, and they've actually just been transferring it and preserving it by writing. And now that it can actually be on global platforms for generations to come, how important is that to preserve a culture? And for it to be implemented in schools. And so for children to be able to use their language and, hold it dear to them. And so I hadn't seen anything where a language had been preserved. And, it's just cultural relevance, and it just shows how important. And I felt grateful. I think sometimes when you learn about some of the challenges that other cultures may face, you're not always privy to it if you don't see it at home or in the media, if you're not, walking in it every day. And so one of the things that I really enjoyed about being a part of this group and looking at these campaigns is just the learning opportunity and seeing, how other cultures are solving some of their problems. And, we all have collective humanity experiences. And so this was really great for me.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, that was a really interesting cultural sort of insight, and Microsoft, I feel like, does a lot of this stuff kind of under the radar because they don't always want to look like they're doing it for any sort of attention. But yeah, that was a McCann campaign, I believe, and really great choice also. For the next 10 minutes, I'd just like to discuss some trends maybe that you guys saw. Obviously, purpose-based advertising is a big trend across all award shows now. And Myra, you mentioned that not a lot of work around sustainability, which surprised you. Why do you think that is? It's an existential threat to humanity. It seems like advertisers have a responsibility to sort of address it in some way.
Yeah, I wish I had the answer. I don't. I do think a lot of companies are a little fearful of greenwashing. I think greenwashing, pride washing, washing of any kind is really frowned upon. And that's great. Like, we should all be sort of policing that and calling it out when it's bullshit. But I hope it doesn't hold us back from talking about it in marketing, because I do think it's a responsibility of any company to look at your sustainability practices and to make people aware of them. In Chicago here, we work with Moen, and they do a lot around it in sort of their day-to-day materials. They have a mission, Moen, where they're saving 1 trillion gallons of water by 2030 through product innovation. But it's not, I guess we just haven't, I think it's coming, but up to this point, none of it has been really award worthy. So it's not on those larger platforms. but I think we need to push them, as we know that they're not greenwashing. They truly are. It's kind of embedded in their everyday and their North Star to talk about it and to do really big award-winning work against it. Again, I don't know. I think, I hope we see more of it. I do think that our another client we work with, Reckitt, has done some good stuff with skip the rinse and trying to change human behavior to use less water. But again, we need more. We need more sustainability work.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just to build on that, I think there really has to be something truly authentic that adds value in the sustainability space for consumers to see the value in it, and for us as juries to award the value in it. So there's really peeling apart in those award categories or in the sustainability space, the creative value of it. And as Myra very eloquently put, is it bullshit or greenwashing? And just to kind of call out a spot that we had some discussion about with regard to it was the United Chief Trash Officer, featuring the beloved Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street. And we had a good amount of conversation around the creative value of the spot, and is their underlying technology that they're celebrating in the spot genuine or not? So we were able to have a distinctive conversation on, do I like this creative? Which, there were different opinions about that, versus, do I believe this technology actually it adds something to the environment or not? Which I think there was some opinion about that around, it felt a bit little greenwashy. So that, I think there was a very distinctive set of conversations around that.
Yeah.
I think we do have a responsibility, though, with our clients to keep pushing them towards even just better solutions. Like, I think it was, I don't want to misquote Barack Obama, but I believe he said something like, it's, if you can't get best, it's okay to do better. Yeah. And I think, like, in our industry, it might not be award winning, but we do need to push our clients to continue to reveal, like, how they can show up. If it starts out inauthentic and it doesn't make it past a jury room, I think that's okay. We can't continue to abandon the idea of progress. And sometimes progress comes from, top down, and sometimes it's bottom up. And I think that more people pushing on more clients to continue to show up in a way that, is going to show up great in an award show, but also show up in a world and really be authentic about it is really important. And again, sometimes better is just okay. Maybe it's just never going to be perfect, but we have to try.
Definitely. Another trend that we sort of talked a little bit about before this call was like big brands entering shows. A lot of award show entries are agencies doing work for smaller brands who perhaps it's easier to do work on a smaller scale. I'd love to hear from each of you kind of, what you saw with the Gerety entries this year in terms of larger brands entering.
I thought there was a good balance, for sure. And within the show, and I have to compliment our client group. I think more and more clients are going to Cannes. We have 4 times as many this year as we did last year. So that makes me hopeful that there will be more brand-led work in the shows. So that's just a little trend I'm seeing within Havas. But
yeah, I mean, I thought that the Twix spot was, charming and wonderful, especially because it's a charming and wonderful product. So, of course, congratulations again on that piece. But also Doritos showed up with the Stranger Things adaptation, where it was, I guess, without getting all the details, it was the product showed up in a Stranger Things spoof and continued to thread that needle really, really well and bring kind of the idea of product and entertainment together. But, we were seeing Doritos logos from, the 80s, and they really just showed up in a really nice, authentic way. And I thought like stuff like that, I'm ready to see. And I think like when big brands can do something that is entertaining and authentic and repositions them in a way where they kind of get back into your hearts, that is really nice. You know, we did see the NFL spot, which was also, you know, I would consider quite a big brand. And I just love that people are doing things with their resources and trying to make really good stuff for the world.
Burger King, McDonald's, Audi.
Oh, McDonald's. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Myra, you probably have a much more deep memory of all of the things. You know, I'm just like looking at things thinking, you know, there's a heap of purpose-driven work that sometimes doesn't hit the mark. And so when there is a considerable amount of big brand work that does hit the mark, that's really great, because that's actually a large part of what our job is, right?
And how could we forget the Prada ad?
Oh, and then there was a very beautifully executed Prada ad.
Okay, that
it
sounds
won't make
mysterious.
me go buy Prada.
No Prada for me.
Okay.
No,
All right.
but very beautiful.
I might have to go try to find that.
Yeah, you should. You should.
Yeah. Gerety is not just about honoring female targeted work. It's just that it's an all-female jury. But I'm curious, some issues like gender pay gap were in some of the entries. DEI generally was a focus of some of the entries too. I'd love to hear a little bit about that. What it was like judging that work in an all-female jury.
Anyone? No, Tiana, Andrea.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we definitely saw a range of entries, and personally, I'm here for that. I think that there's space to have an all-female jury evaluate things that are specifically targeted to women. I think that there's space to have things that are open to a general audience, judged by an all-female jury, and things that are targeted to people that aren't women, evaluated by women. We saw a very interesting entry targeted to men, to have them have their liver checked, that I thought was fascinating, really interesting, that I thought, frankly, was pretty effective. And I think did lean into some gender stereotypes.
Yeah.
And speaking to men. I think fairly effective, if I'm honest about it. I saw some work that was specifically targeted to women that I think missed the mark in trying too hard to speak to women, that I think over rotated and then didn't really get into a specific insight, and so or an authentic insight that resonated with women. So gosh, and I maybe it's helpful to call out the work to maybe help rethink about it. But you know, I think maybe anytime you're trying to get into maybe being too patriarchal about telling women how to think about their bodies, or how to view the world, is maybe a time to reevaluate if you have the right insight on something. So I do think it, but that said, I think that there were some work that was incredibly compelling, that was speaking to women and educating on issues that were specific to women. I thought there was a portrayal of an iMoney app that talked about economic violence as the first step in domestic violence. That was really eye-opening, that I think could have been compelling to women and or men. So it was just compelling to people as educational. So I think that there's space for all of that, and I was thrilled to see it. I hope to see more of it in the future.
Yeah, the financial independence thing, we talk a lot about. A lot of work, I think, is doing a great job, especially in sports with the gender pay gap, trying to get female athletes paid what their counterparts are being paid, or even half of what they're being paid. But that piece you talked about from Canada about financial independence. And then we saw one from India with the Shagan, the gift when you get married to allow women to open a bank account, and it was work for a bank. I thought was great. I think we need more of that, like the, not just gender, like pay equality, but like just financial independence, period. We did hear a lot of women in the room talk about, like, that's one of the first things their mom taught them growing up is you better get your financial independence, because that's sort of key to freedom. So would love to see more banks. I know Data La Tienda, I forget the client for that one, but that was a great one, establishing a credit line for women based on a credit history at C-stores. You know, I think it's another huge societal problem that I think creativity and involvement from brands could fix.
And I'll add to what Mara said about financial independence, because I really did enjoy that. It was like the small finance bank in India. Yeah. And what I loved about it was that it was doing more than bringing awareness to an issue. They had this product, they're actually giving you the currency to actually go open up this account. So there really is there's multiple touch points to ensure that we're bringing you value and you're actually able to, have financial independence. We're actually giving you the currency to actually go do it. And so I think sometimes when we looked at some of the campaigns or spots, you get awareness, you may get a mindset change, but when you actually saw a holistic approach that you can actually go activate this. I think we talked about value earlier. We actually created something that you can actually go activate, and actually moving from awareness to activation. I mean, I think it's more beneficial to everyone. And so I really enjoyed that because it actually moved the women to activation. They can actually do this. And we're also learning about it, but they can actually do this, which made it authentic. It made it real.
Excellent. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to wrap it up with one other trend, which is, not to dismiss purpose-based advertising, because there's a lot of good being done. But I'm just wondering what the balance was between that stuff, because award shows have gotten a rap lately for not being very fun because there's so much serious work in them. I'm wondering, how much advertising you felt was really just entertaining for its own sake in the work that you guys saw this year.
I didn't see a lot of entertainment. I mean, we did see a lot of, we saw work in the health industry, which is, you have to find that balance. I think we saw one ad that was trying to kind of cross this boundary of being entertaining, but when we're talking about children's health and their experiences within a hospital, that's a fine line to cross. So I think that with some of the with health and social impact, it was kind of a fine line where it was kind of like, you don't want to, that's not funny. There was a certain way you had to kind of tell the story. I think earlier, Alyssa, she mentioned the Doritos campaign. And I would say that was one of the most entertaining pieces that we saw. And what I loved about it was that it was cross-generational. I think the pieces to me that were the most entertaining were cross-generational, where you saw multiple people being involved in the storytelling experience. There was a campaign, I can't remember where it was from, where it was kind of the movies that were made from us. It was a weird title, like movies that
that was crazy. I loved it.
I loved it. And they were like, interviewed all these people from different generations and walks of life, asking them about their movies, and they reenacted all these movies within one take. Like it was,
from Thailand. I know
that was really weird
product, but it was great.
About that.
And so I would say the entertaining ones that were inclusive they hit the mark. I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah,
I mean, I think that
I don't think purpose and entertainment have to be antithetical to one another. I think that the Women in Games gender swap proved that.
yeah.
Another great spot, Want Show Laundry, about rememory, just kind of showing like old people with dementia, you know, supporting that cause, and like finding like unclaimed clothing in laundromats, and just like showing people like living their best life who had dementia. Totally entertaining. And I think sometimes as marketers, as advertisers, like we forget like there is joy and purpose and entertainment factor and purpose. I guess that's our, you know, incumbent on us as an industry to bring that to life. And it's not always sad stories. Like sometimes there is an element of sadness that inspires that, but we don't always have to bring it to life in that manner.
Even the Burger King ad. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Myra.
I was just going to say, you made me realize the Burger King ad in itself was sort of a sustainability. If people all switched to vegan nuggets, the world would be a better place. And you don't always have to say that like overtly as sustainability, just make better choices with better products. So I thought it was a good balance, but Elisa, what do you think?
Well, I mean, I thought it was an okay balance, but you know, I'm wary of some of the purpose-driven work that doesn't really hit the mark, and you wonder why people are doing them. And that's not I suppose that is a judgment on the work. You know, if you are going to use the resources and time to do something purpose-driven that isn't entertaining and doesn't even make me feel anything, then why would we do that? And, you know, right now it's gosh, to state the absolute cliche, it's so hard to watch the news. And as advertisers and people responsible for telling stories about brands, I could see a little bit more joy and happiness and lightheartedness in some of the work. I think that the NFL work, you know, talked about something that was really important and positioned women in a way of power that wasn't cliche or demeaning, but was also extremely entertaining. And so I think you just have to hit the mark right and deliver work that kind of makes us feel a lot of different things all at once. Not everything can only be one thing. And I wish there was a little bit more of that. I didn't see as much as I wanted to, but maybe that's because I did see some great stuff and I was just craving more.
Mm-hmm. Add to that, I think to add to that is you really have to believe it. I think it has to, when you're creating these public narratives, when you're putting this information out there, you as a brand have to actually believe it too. You have to really believe in it. You have to really invest in it for us to believe in it as well. I think that just kind of goes back to that whole, your business practices and your own brand values and ideologies. You know, if we believe that you believe that and you're actually carrying these things out before it becomes a spot, then we can connect to it because it's not a surprise. It's not something that, you know, we didn't see you do this all year and here comes, you know, a holiday and now you're whipping out this really emotional spot, you know, we have to be invested in you as a brand as well, so we can believe that the story that you're telling, the narrative that you're telling is believable, is true. So I think that brands, it has to be something that they do consistently, and they have to carry these values and practices throughout the year internally within their organizations and with their customers and consumers. So it just has to be a holistic approach and not just a moment. So I think sometimes we could see when something was a moment.
Definitely. All right. Well, I think we're out of time. We're gonna have to leave it there, but this has been a really fun conversation. Wanted to thank the panel, Myra, Elisa, Lindrea, Tiana. Great to chat with you. Thanks so much. Thanks to Gerety for having us, and thanks to all of you for watching. I'm Tim Nudd with Ad Age, and happy